Basic authentication is not encouraged by ASP.NET Core because login and password ID are sent as plain text in the request header. It's vulnerable to cross-site request forgery attacks also. So there are no ready-made classes like we have for cookies-based authentication. But if your project still needs to allow basic authentication, perhaps because your security requirements are not of extreme cutting edge, in that case, we present a simple solution that helps you protect a web API with basic authorization. It can be a lot safer with basic authentication and authorization if your communication is over HTTPS, and even better if XSRF measures are taken. But these measures are beyond the scope of this tutorial, so you will have to study them at your own level. And right now, we'll talk about basic authentication in a simple manner. Basic authentication is defined in a standard called RFC 2617. You can consider going through Mozilla developers documentation for a quick reading and the associated practical aspects. A user sends a GET request containing an authorization header in the format basic space base64 of login and password. The login and password are separated by a colon. The server has to decode the header and it extracts the login and password and then authenticates the user. If the authentication succeeds, the user is served with his data as 200 OK response, and however, if the authentication fails, then the server responds as 401 unauthorized. The protocol requires that the server should also send a header www authenticate of value basic space realm is equal to followed by any purpose for which the credentials are required, which is usually a website domain. So with this simple explanation of the protocol, we have done a very crude implementation of basic authentication in the project attached to this tutorial. Open the Solution Explorer and locate the program.cs file. Double click to open it. Let's examine the code line by line. The first few lines are the boilerplate code that we are already familiar with. Then we have a get web API that receives the authorization header through a parameter binding. After that, a check for the existence of this header is made, followed by extraction of user ID and password. Since this is a tutorial, we assume a successful verification. If authentication fails, a www or wauthenticate header is sent with a 401 response. And if it succeeds, a 200 OK response is sent along with any data requested by the client side. So we can now test the project. Run the project and send a GET request to the web API/token. This request doesn't send any authorization header, so the web API sends a 401 response along with the www-authenticate header as we have programmed. But almost every browser understands basic authentication and the response, so it automatically presents a login and password box. You can type any values here because anything is accepted. This server will create a base64 authorization header and make a proper call. So let's hit enter. The server accepts the call and responds with a 200 OK response. So things are going as expected. We can now test the same project with HTTP REPL also. Open Visual Studio and use the menu Tools Command Line Developer Command Prompt to open a command prompt. Now type the command HTTP REPL followed by the server address. This will connect you to the server endpoint. And next send a GET request get/token without any headers and hit the enter key. We expect a failure and therefore we observe that the server responds with the www-authenticate header as we have programmed. Next, make a request with a header. We can send any string for the credentials because this is a tutorial. So right now, to set the header, type set header authorization basic followed by any string which in a real project would be base 64 of login and password. Hit the enter key. This will set the header, and after that send a get request get/token. We verify that the server responds with 200 OK as expected. Thank you.